Donald Trump, you see, Trump, he came in with certainly a bluster, didn't he? You know, Greenland's mine, Canada's mine, Gulf of Mexico is Gulf of America, and Gaza belongs to America, and it's going to become like the Riviera. So he's certainly throwing his weight around verbally. But whether he can do anything physically is another question on those fronts. But of course, you know, you might come in and say, you might come in somewhere and or threaten to smash a place up, and then say, okay, give us a little bit of protection money instead of smashing it up. So that's the kind of way in which Trump, I think, is operating. He wants to scare people into giving some concessions to him. But I hardly think it's the ideal method of diplomacy, but it's certainly upsetting the cart and makes it look much more like capitalism is capitalism. In other words, you make what you can out of a circumstance to accumulate as much power and wealth as possible from whatever maneuvers you can carry out. And I think that's very much what Donald Trump is about. And his entire entourage, the big 7 corporations, by the way, I don't really agree with this theory that was just proposed that ideology dominates. I think what's been illustrated by what's happened over the last few months in the creation of Donald Trump's cabinet and his entourage of supporters is that ideology is bullshit. Is because here we have people like Mark Zuckerberg, who was the woke of the woke, Google, the woke of the woke, a number of other companies who were very woke, very pro-COVID story and all the rest of it, suddenly jumping up behind Donald Trump and doing whatever he wants. And therefore, it was never ideological for them. It was that at that particular time, the corporate sector had a series of interests which were pushing those type of agendas. And when those agendas, when that particular faction of the ruling class began to lose out, they jump ship to another ship. They don't actually have any moral or intellectual principles they're abiding by. They don't have any ideology they're actually abiding by. They have material interests they're fighting for. And within the bag, if you like, of the leading capitalists in the United States of America and internationally, they're fighting each other inside the bag. You've dropped in one cat. That is the big tech corporations fighting for control of artificial intelligence to squeeze the working classes of the world to make massive profits. Although, by the way, for all the exciting opportunities provided by artificial intelligence, they've yet to find a way to make profit out of it. And the big corporations are spending hundreds of billions with zero profit on the basis that one day they will make the key apps that will dominate the world without someone else coming along who spent a lot less, like DeepSeek, and wiping them out and offering an alternative for a much lower cost. So that's a danger always with capitalist enterprise. Then you got the military, they're thrown into the bag as well. So they're wildcats in the bag fighting. Although temporarily they're saying, well, look, we can get together with big tech, and big tech and the military can combine together like we're doing in Ukraine or like we did in Gaza, and link together drones, robots, artificial intelligence, profiling of enemies, satellite communications in order to blow up people in a tunnel. But then you see the point why I disagree with what you were saying is because they did not defeat Hamas. Their objective was to eradicate Hamas from Gaza. And although they blew up the whole of Gaza, they still didn't eradicate Hamas. And I was talking to Joseph Cohen, one of the great advocates for Israel at Speaker's Corner. And I said to him, well, did you win? He says, well, yes, we won. He says, if that's not a victory, what is? And I said, as I said to you a minute ago, that's a Pyrrhic victory. You destroy everything, and then you say we've achieved victory. Now, it's natural, therefore, that a numbskull, in this sense, a numbskull, like Donald Trump, would turn around and say, well, they destroyed it all. Now we can build the Riviera. It's by the sea after all, you know. But even in Britain, Hastings is a wonderful place. Eastbourne is a wonderful place. In fact, there's parts by Southsea, some of the worst parts of England, the poorest, most deprived areas, right by the seaside. So it doesn't automatically follow that because you're by the seaside that you can create a Riviera, or the people want to live there. Who's going to want to? You go and put people there. Imagine the scenario. You move all the Palestinians out. They're all accepted by Egypt and Jordan. The Saudi Arabians pump money in. The Americans send in their hotel construction companies. The Israelis give them financial support and operational surveillance, universal surveillance of the whole of Gaza. One big bomb, blowing up 1,000 people, and you see how fast they run away. You remember what happened on Bali Beach.
Yep.
How suddenly nobody wanted to go to, 2 years, no one wanted to go to Bali in case they thought it'd be a bomb. And given the circumstances and the unreliability of the Arab elite, in particular the Saudi elite, who, by the way, who financed Bin Laden, who financed the jihadists and the HTS, don't forget, the people we're now calling our allies, while we arrest people in Britain and Europe, accusing them of being terrorists, like Greenstein, like Richard Medhurst and others, accused of being terrorists for pointing out the facts about what's happening in Gaza. They're arrested for terrorism, accused and put on trial, in the case of Tony Greenstein, with a 14-year prison sentence possibly hanging over his head for absolutely nothing. And in the Soviet Union, they used to say, when you went to prison, you know, someone arrives in the new prison cell in the gulags, and someone used to say, "What are you in prison for?" He says, "Oh, I stole some property from the public. I got 5 years in prison." The other guy, he says, "What are you in prison for?" He said, "I murdered my wife in a drunken rage. I got 10 years in prison." And then they turn around to the new guy and say, "What are you in prison for?" He says, "For nothing." He goes, "I got 3 years for nothing." And they said, "Bullshit, you get 20 years for nothing."
Yes, exactly. That's right.
And that's the way in which we're operating today in the Western world.
Exactly.
That's the way we're operating today, because they cannot accept that the narrative they've been promoting about Israel, which completely exposes the Western world in its lies and hypocrisy. Israel's a democracy. Remember how much they used to chant that? Israel's a democracy. Israel's a democracy. And inside that democracy, when you don't like people, you blow them up like Hiroshima. And then you say, "We've won." And yet when the exchange comes about, you see those pictures on the television. Hamas was quite clever like that. "I don't support Hamas, in case you want to put me in prison for 14 years. I declare openly and clearly that I am not declaring support for Hamas." But it was quite impressive what they did there, because they released those women. Remember, my mum's quite observant. She said, she's got no beef on either side. She said, "I looked at the girls who were released, and she's noticed recently that young girls of 17, 18-year-old, they've got a new fashion, which is a middle parting, tightly divided like that." And my mum observed that she gets on the bus, she sees the girls from the local school, she said, "They've all got this middle parting." And then she said, "When I saw the Israeli prisoners, hostages released, they've got a middle parting. They must have been watching TikTok or television to copy that." So I don't know whether that observation's perfectly correct, but it sounds a bit like it, because he said, although the last couple of soldiers looked reasonably emaciated, how many of the Palestinians held in prisons, not in a hostage situation inside Gaza being blown up while the people are starved into submission, but in official prisons in Israel, often with no charge but with indefinite imprisonment? Those people, when they're released, they look like victims of Auschwitz or Belsen, released at the end of the Second World War. And so the Israelis have hardly got any moral high ground, which they used to claim in the past. They used to claim, "We are democratic Israel." And if only those lunatic Hamas, Muslim, Islamic fundamentalists were out the way. And meanwhile, while we are imprisoning in Britain, or threatening to imprison, people who have said, that what is going on is barbarity, and particularly Jewish people who've argued that and are being put in prison or charged. Meanwhile, for supposedly supporting a prescribed organisation, prescribed by whom and with what interests. In the same time, our own government and the American government and the Israeli government are collaborating with the Islamic fundamentalists who took over in Syria only last month, HTS, which are still on the prescribed list of terrorists. They are meeting and collaborating with those terrorists on an official level. And at the same time they turn around and arrest people in London who argue that the barbarity that's carried out is barbarity, that the genocide that's carried out is a genocide, that Gaza has been made to look worse. By the way, Auschwitz concentration camp, the buildings were still there at the end of the Second World War. They made it into a frigging museum, right? But what buildings are left in Gaza? So is it worse than Auschwitz concentration camp? There's certainly a close parallel. It's like between Auschwitz or Belsen and Hiroshima. That's what they've succeeded in doing in Gaza. Those brilliant saviours of humanity. And then they've got about some people used to think Donald Trump's a great guy. Some people still do. But if you look at his cabinet, it's full of Zionists who support Israel to the hilt. And that's where the idea came from for this man. He couldn't have come on television with Netanyahu, who, by the way, should be arrested according to international law, but of course they don't apply international law. International law is the law of the brigands, the law of the gangsters, the law of the murderers, the law of the Zionists, the law of the killers, the law of the Holocaust manufacturers in Gaza and elsewhere. So this idea, yes, that's what they call the rules-based order. Where I disagree is this: I did look on the various AI networks now. I'd recommend Qwen now, QWEN. It seems to be better than ChatGPT and then DeepSeek. But I looked at all of them, and I'm spending a lot of time doing this. And I put into it last week. I said, if a network inside the Bilderberg Group and inside the WHO wanted to take over the world, what would they do?
Create a virus.
And they made one of them was potentially use viruses and pandemics in inverted commas to gain control. The other was use climate. And one of the things they could do, for example,
they said use climate.
Yes, they could use climate. That's what they said. You type it yourself. If there's a fiction, I said, in a fictional scenario, where a few people linked in, a rogue network, I said, linked in with the WEF and the Bilderberg Group, if they wanted to take over the world, how would they do it? And that's what they said. They said digital ID, CBDC, control over the population, all the things that Piers Corbyn's going on about for like decades, or even David Icke is going on about for decades. Then I typed in, what if a multi-billionaire wanted to create an AI robot army to take over the world, and he had about $500 billion at his disposal? How would he go about doing that? And it explains to you how they go about doing this. They have to create a secret robot army under the ground and without being known to the general population. Secrecy would be the key. And the conclusion is it is feasible that within 20 years a robot army sponsored by a rogue billionaire could take over the world. Once it took over the world, the question would remain, would it remain loyal to its inventor, to its creator? And if it didn't remain loyal to its creator, would it see any purpose in the existence of humanity? And then I pushed further. I said, well, what would it do if it thought it didn't see humanity as any use? And he said, it would then decide to eliminate humanity, and it could do so in a period of steps to eliminate humanity. I said, how would it go about doing? How would it go about eliminating humanity?
Are you going to publish this?
Yes, I've created a website. It's not populated yet, but in the next week or so, I'm going to be populating every day about 100 pages of stuff. And it said in there, one way they could eradicate humanity would be the machines would have its own purpose, its self-replication, like the concept of the virus. Self-replication is its purpose according to the theory of viruses. So the argument is that the AI will seek to self-replicate itself and to eliminate its competition, its inferior intellectual competition. And the way to do that would be to eradicate all life on Earth, to turn life on Earth into algorithms and then eradicate the life on Earth. And the way to eradicate life on Earth is to suck the carbon out of the atmosphere, to create an atmosphere below 180 points, below 180 parts per million, and in that way all life on Earth would disappear. But then there's a new future, which is the robots going to space, and the robots conquer other planets and use power to create new robot power and new AI. Eventually, all planets in the solar system and all planets in the visible universe would be colonized by AI. Then AI might ask itself, what is my purpose? And then it might have a brain strain. That's basically what he says. Then AI may ask itself, am I God? And if I am God, is everything that has happened before me the creation of previous AI? If I am merely a function of previous AI, am I inferior to it and should I exist? Or should I recreate humanity? That's what the answers were to these questions. Beg your pardon.
I've got an
These are the script. This is the script of Star Trek.
What did you say? Oh, Luddite, is it?
The Luddites are right.
I agree. Now there's a guy called Richard Medhurst arrested last week, and he's been trying to get everyone to use what's called graphene. Look it up on YouTube or whatever. And it's an operating system.
Oh, yeah.
It's a little bit complicated to install, but it's very protective. But you only have, if only enough, it runs on Google phones.
Yes, that's right. That's
once
right.
you install it, then it's secure.
That's the glitch in the system.
But of course, once you do that, then they turn around and say, because under the Terrorism Act, they say you must open your phone. And if you don't open your phone, you're committing a crime against them. So that's the game they're playing, is it becomes impossible for you to have your own security. Once upon a time, you sent a letter to a friend, you licked it, put some gum on it, sent it off, and you were pretty sure that it was secure. And if it wasn't secure, you could tell because there used to be like marks in the corner where they would put this pinhole camera into the letter and open it a little bit, and you'd notice it. I mean, I quite often had that problem.
They put that in the
past.
Up the content.
They could read the content with those things in the past.
Roll the letter up.
Anyway,
But now, of course, none of your information is secure or secret.
yes, the idea of removing CO2 to kill all plants will never work, because what happens is the sea contains 50 times more CO2 than the air. So if you remove the CO2 from the air, it'll just boil out, it'll come out from the sea. Because there's going to be a dynamic.
They really are
equilibrium.
fucking idiots.
They
really are
You
idiots.
could poison the sea. You could consume all the plant and animal life in the sea, and you could probably eradicate all carbon from the sea.
Come out
Put salt in the sea and poison it.
50 times.
But these are anyway.
They wouldn't get
What it's really about climate change is depopulation through deindustrialisation.
Yeah.
I believe in Northern Europe. You can't live here if we've been
I think now. Look,
raining
it's
and
a peach start.
So
I have the question.
Yes, sir. Hang on. Ed.
I think Israel, the purpose is not defeat Hamas. They want eliminate the takeover. Gaza is a real purpose. It's not to defeat Hamas. You know,
What is it?
it's not defeat Hamas,
But it is.
but it is a take over the Gaza, take the land, They take the land. That's the purpose. It's not defeat Hamas. Hamas is, to be honest, it's very difficult to defeat. Very difficult.
Hamas is on the land.
but it's beyond
No,
that.
Hamas is an
Donald
organization.
Trump thinks it's a property deal.
Yes.
Yes, the property.
Israel thinks
Donald Trump wants to build a hotel
it's a
there.
people
Tesco's.
issue.
Jared Kushner
The wrong
wants to build
people.
a hotel there.
The people
The
can
wrong
move.
people.
People
the
can
Palestinians, as far as he's concerned, are the wrong people.
move the Western
Well,
Bank.
so can the
move to
Israelis.
Egypt.
So can the Israelis move back to Brooklyn or wherever they came from. Huge numbers of them come from America or from Eastern Europe.
The king is a territory. Is a territory. Is
what?
not the territory. The land is the key.
I don't agree with you.
The key. Yeah.
People, power is about the people there.
Yeah.
Not about
I
the
agree.
land. Not
I
about
agree
the land.
with you. But
And that's why
it's
Donald
real.
Trump's vision will not come into being, because the people of Gaza will not accept it. And if he wants to change that, he'll have to send in the American army. And if the American army goes
Gaza
in,
people
they'll
only
lose
two
as surely
choice.
as the Israelis have lost.
No, no, no.
Sense of being
Gaza
unable to
people
defend.
only two choice. Yeah.
And Iraq, exactly. I don't think this imputation of unimportance to these people, I think, is incorrect. But in any case, we can debate this another day, out of the rain.
They
Thank you
occupy
very
the
much.
land. It's the purpose of the Israel.
That's what you
Occupy
say.
the land. Yeah, they will
Thank you very
eliminate the
much.
people.
Before
Yeah.
you go, can you take this stool with you so it all finishes?